Welcome to this episode of Chatting with Staxx. I'm your host, Bill Staxx, and today I got Torre Bonano.
My grandfather, one time my cousin and I came into town, and I was going to school at University of Arizona in Tucson at the time, and I went to my house first, and then we went and worked out, and then we got cleaned up, and then we went and saw Grandpa, and he was so pissed that we didn't go to him first. He goes, "When you come into town, you acknowledge, the first thing you do." So from then on, whenever I came to town, I always went to Grandpa's first. But now, as I'm older, of course, I didn't, impart that wisdom on my children. But I still expect, they don't come to see me first. I still take it as an insult.
That
right?
family thing is really important. It was
I know it's my fault for not, I didn't raise them that way. But yet I still kind of expect it, right? So it's kind of weird because like, well, yeah, you should know that. And then I think back how I learned. I didn't know it when I was, a teenager, but I learned it, As far as you say for names, and that's the weird thing. People are always asking me about, who was there, but all I knew is like, if the guys were, whatever part of the, maid guys, they were Uncle Pete, Uncle Hank, Uncle Frank, Uncle John, right? And then there was these other guys that were, Mr. Tromolono, Mr. Borghese, so there was a difference how they introduced him, whether if they said Uncle, he was one of the guys. If it was Mr., he was just, a friend. Yeah. And so usually during the early part of the day, like maybe 10 o'clock to noon, there would be, the uncles coming over to see Grandpa just for a few minutes and leaving. And then in the afternoon, they would have usually, local people, husband and wife would come over with cake and coffee. So those would be totally social things, but that Italian community or Sicilian community in Tucson, especially early in the 40s and 50s was real close, but even in the 80s they were still pretty close, because it was the same people. They were just now in the later stages of life, but they still did that. Come over with a box of Etmans and they would have coffee at 4 p.m, right? That was their version of happy hour. The Deacons who were like, they used to come over. They were friends. But then when he became senator, they wanted to distance themselves. But prior to that, they were all part of a small, close-knit Italian Sicilian community in Tucson. So
did people come to your grandfather for like help with problems in the neighborhood?
And then there was absolutely. Then there was those people that just came, randomly, because his house would be on the news and they would announce, back then they were, they would say at 255 Sierra Vista Drive, and then people would show up, right? And the crazies, he would, I remember him, he didn't confront people. He would talk to them, especially the crazies, because you can pretty much identify the crazies, right? And he seemed to be nicer to the crazies than he was to just the random fans, that would come over wanting to autograph. He would usually just chase them away. But the crazy people, he kind of took him under his wing and, gave him some money and had one of his guys pick him up and drive him somewhere.
Wow.
And then there was always seemed like it was a constant, either FBI guys or somebody from the court, the attorney general's office, or the local police were always seemed to be coming by for one reason or another. Mostly
like trying to infiltrate, right? Like sending different.
The police would come by whenever they needed money because they know he was always donating to their police. They used to have policeman balls and they would raise money with raffles, and he was always good for money. So he had a lot of friends in the Tucson PD that were just local guys, right? So, and you could tell those visits were different. And then like the FBI would have cars parked out there. They'd be, Crown Vics or whatever, just total. You could tell it's a government car, and there'd be a guy sitting out there. And, even there'd been times where I remember my mom sending out sandwiches because that guy's been sitting there all day. Go bring him a sandwich, So,
and what was your father's attitude towards these guys?
Oh yeah, my father had, Grandpa was, I think, a little more tolerant. Yeah, my dad would, he would chase him away, and he would usually have something to say. He never did anything embarrassing or, attack anybody or, verbally abuse somebody. But, he was kind of a big dude. And when he told somebody to leave, they usually left without much argument. But yeah, dad had much less patience when it came to that kind of stuff. So
Yeah, were they like the same kind of person, or were they a lot different in personalities?
yeah, I mean, they were in personality, they were different, but Dad was raised, by Grandpa, and he that code, that way of life was just embedded in him, and he definitely put his brothers and his the guys before anything else, right? He was fully, my dad was fully committed to my grandfather. He was fully committed to the family. When I said family in that sense, I mean, the guys,
The capital
right,
B,
the
right?
capital F,
The
right.
capital F. Yeah, yeah. You want to
Um,
explain that to the people, because
oh,
I don't know if they understand.
right.
Like,
That's
there's
from our
two.
previous discussion,
Yeah,
right? But
yeah.
right, whenever we talk about, what they call the Bonano crime family, that's family with a capital F. That's the bigger, notorious family, whatever you want to call that, whatever it's become today. They still use the same name. It's basically a marketing term, capital F. But when you're talking about family like mom and brothers, and that's smaller, lowercase f, that's, the Bonano family. That's just our, kin. So most of the time, I'm talking, the people want to know about the capital F family. But, the stuff, of course, that I'm more familiar with, and the stuff that I lived, was the lowercase family, the behind closed doors, so to speak.
So, how do you feel about a crime family using your last name after your grandfather and your father's passed away? How do you feel that they still use the name to this day?
Well, there's a certain amount of, pride in that, because they didn't keep the other names, right? Facci's gone, Colombo's gone, right? They don't use those other names.
Well,
They do.
Colombo's still there.
Yeah, Colombo. That's true. I take that back. So,
Colombo crime family's still kicking. They were indicted not too long ago. A bunch of
I was going
indictments
to say,
just came
just
down.
yesterday I saw.
Yep.
So that's right. So that's kind of a source of pride, I guess, that they're still using the name. And then, I wish I could figure out how to get royalties, on it, right? It's like, it's got to be a way to cash in on this, because it is our name and you're using it. So, I should get some royalties for it, right? At least that's the way I see it.
I mean, I hear that they have lawyers and everything, the crime family.
Yeah. I mean, there's, it's like an organ, it's like a big, corporation, right? And they've refined it. We're in 2023 now. They're not just a bunch of thugs, hassling people on the wharfs, right? It's these are sophisticated, smart guys that could, be successful in any business they're in. They just, they chose the business they chose, but they're no less educated. They're no less crafty, and they're no less, motivated.
Yeah. Is there any stories your grandfather or your father told you that you could tell us?
Like I said, with my grandfather, I always had a kind of an arm's length, relationship with him, because any time that he talked to me or any of my, cousins or my brothers and sisters, he wanted to impart knowledge some way, right? Because he thought, we were all lacking, because, here we are, I was in college, and, I didn't know how to navigate by the stars. I didn't know all the constellations. I couldn't quote the Odyssey. I couldn't speak, any language but, English. And I was taking Spanish in college, and I was, barely able to say my name. Right. So, he was very disappointed in the American education system. He felt that, we were dumb Americans, and he needed to educate us. So whenever he spoke to, myself or my cousins, like I said, it was always trying to teach us something, and at that time, you think it's, some long drawn out story from some old guy that makes, I just want to get out of here. Right. And
yeah, you don't appreciate it at the
right.
time, right?
Now, now later in life, I think back, some of the things, that they would say, that would, that have stuck with me and, make me laugh. Like just the other day, I'm very bad about locking the doors, right? Just because it's in my head, because when I was a kid, my mom used to lock all the doors and windows on the house. And, one day Dad was there, and she was locking up, and she goes, "Ro, what are you afraid of?" I mean, you're afraid of the bad guys? We are the bad guys, right? So, um, that just changed my whole outlook on things. And to this day, it's like, I still have that in my mind. Right? It's like, who's going to come? I mean, really? I mean, why even bother locking the door? Because especially when I'm home, right? Because
they come into your house, they got a major problem.
Right. And I'm the kind of guy that, kind of lives for that. I'm welcome. I wish somebody would do that. Right.
Yeah.
So, wrong house, dude. But anyway, there's there's things like that. And then, like I said, mom's sending me out to, when we lived in California back in the 70s, dad was having problems with the IRS. And once, when grandpa left in 68, he left New York, right? And then we moved to California. So all through the 70s, the IRS, all of them, the attorney general's up, they were all after dad. And they would have their IRS agent, Mr. Summers, sitting out front, and he would just be parked in a car waiting, for dad to come home. He would ask us, hey, do you know where your dad is? When your dad's coming home, and say, we didn't know. No, Mr. Summers, we didn't know.
What was your dad doing for work at that time?
What did my dad ever do for work?